A hand shoves. A woman stumbles. A collective gasp echoes through the confined space of a passenger jet. The incident begins with a simple, polite request for help and ends in a moment of shocking disrespect. On Airline Airlines Flight 723, senior flight attendant Brittany Gable makes the single biggest mistake of her career. The woman she shoves a quiet, unassuming black passenger in coach is not just another customer. She is Dr. Alistair Vance, the phantom billionaire who, under a different name, purchased the struggling airline and is now its unseen, unheard owner. Brittany has no idea that her act of contempt wasn't just witnessed by passengers. It was felt by the one person who holds her entire future in the palm of her hand. What follows isn't just a firing. It's a story of hard karma, a public unraveling, and a powerful lesson in what happens when you underestimate the person sitting in seat 28B. The air in the cabin of Airline Airlines Flight 723 from New York to San Francisco was a familiar cocktail of recycled oxygen, faint jet fuel, and the low-grade anxiety of 200 strangers strapped into a metal tube. For most, it was a routine commute, a necessary evil to bridge the continent. For the woman in seat 28B, it was a reconnaissance mission. Under the name Lena Hughes, Dr. Alistair Vance looked nothing like the titan of industry she was. Her hair was pulled back in a simple, elegant twist, her face free of makeup. She wore a simple grey cashmere sweater, comfortable dark jeans, and plain leather flats. There was no flashy jewelry, no designer handbag. The only hint of her status was the worn, leather-bound copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations resting in her lap. It was a deliberate costume of anonymity. 6 months ago, her investment firm, Vance Conglomerate, had acquired the failing Stratus Air, a legacy carrier hemorrhaging money and goodwill. Alistair, a PhD in logistical engineering and a self-made billionaire, saw potential where others saw ruin. She rebranded it as Airline Airlines, pouring $100 million into fleet upgrades and operational logistics. But she knew that new planes and better scheduling were only half the battle. The soul of an airline, its public face, was its cabin crew, and reports from her internal auditors were troubling. They spoke of a deep-seated rot, a culture of entitlement and customer neglect that had festered under the old Stratus Air management. The data was one thing. Alistair needed to feel it to see it for herself. So Lena Hughes was born a ghost in her own machine. The boarding process was her first exhibit. It was chaotic, not with the cheerful energy of a holiday flight, but with a tense, disorganized friction. Presiding over the economy cabin was senior flight attendant Brittany Gable. Brittany was a woman who wore her authority like a shield. With sharp features, a severe blonde bun pulled so tight it seemed to stretch the skin at her temples, and a voice that cut through the cabin chatter. She wasn't welcoming. She was policing. Alistair watched her. She saw Brittany snap at an elderly man who was struggling to find his seat, her voice dripping with impatience. "Sir, the numbers are right there. Let's keep the aisle clear." She saw her roll her eyes at a young mother trying to soothe a crying baby. "Ma'am, we can't delay departure because your child is fussy," Brittany had said, loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear. The mother, already stressed, shrank in her seat, her face flushing with shame. Alistair felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This was the rot the reports spoke of. It wasn't just poor service, it was a fundamental lack of human decency. This was the culture she had paid a fortune to eradicate, yet here it was thriving at 30,000 feet, wearing her new uniform. The crisp navy blue suit, the small golden aura wing pin. It was all a lie if this was the spirit animating it. Brittany moved through the cabin with an air of aggrieved importance, as if the passengers were an inconvenience to her workday. Her smiles were thin, her movements sharp and economical. She wasn't a hostess. She was a warden. Alistair noted how Brittany's demeanor changed when she interacted with another flight attendant, a younger, nervous-looking man named Alex. With him, she was conspiratorial, whispering and laughing behind her hand, casting glances towards the passengers as if sharing a private joke at their expense. Alistair opened her book, but the words of the Stoic philosopher felt distant. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. A wise sentiment. But Alistair wasn't thinking of revenge. She was thinking of surgery. A cancer had to be cut out before it could metastasize. The plane finished boarding. Alistair had deliberately chosen a window seat and had placed her small, regulation-sized rollerboard on the floor in front of the empty middle seat, hoping to slide it under her own once her neighbors were seated. Her seatmate in 28C, a young student with headphones already on, had arrived early. The aisle seat 28A remained empty. As the final boarding call echoed, a large man, flustered and sweating, hustled down the aisle and squeezed into 28A. The final puzzle piece was in place. With all the seats now occupied, Alistair knew she needed to stow her bag. The overhead bin directly above her was already full-packed tight with oversized duffels and jackets. She craned her neck, spotting a sliver of available space in the bin across the aisle slightly behind her row. It would be an awkward maneuver to get up, step over her seatmate, and lift the bag against the flow of people still settling in. She was perfectly capable of doing it. But this was a test. The purpose of her journey was to experience the airline as a regular customer, and a regular customer would reasonably ask for help. She waited for a lull a moment when Brittany Gable was nearby. She saw her a few rows ahead, forcefully slamming an overhead bin shut. Now was the time. Taking a calm, steadying breath, Alistair pressed the call button above her head. The small light illuminated a silent summons. Brittany saw it. Alistair watched as her eyes flicked to the glowing light, and a micro-expression of pure annoyance crossed her face before being smoothed away into her default mask of impatient neutrality. She began to walk slowly, deliberately towards Alistair's row, her steps heavy with reluctance. The storm brewing silently in the pressurized cabin was about to make landfall in row 28. Alistair steeled herself. She wasn't Lena Hughes, the timid passenger. She was Dr. Vance, the owner, and she was about to audit her company's soul face to face. The low hum of the engines was a drumbeat counting down to the inevitable confrontation. Brittany Gable arrived at row 28 with an air of profound irritation. She did not make eye contact with Alistair initially. Instead, she addressed the overhead light as if it were the source of the problem. "Yes," she asked, her voice flat and clipped. The single word hung in the air, devoid of warmth or any pretense of helpfulness. Alistair maintained a polite, even tone. "Excuse me," she began, gesturing towards her small bag on the floor. "I was hoping you could help me. The bin above me is full, but I see a spot just over there." She pointed across the aisle. "I'm just a bit boxed in here, and I don't want to hold everyone up." It was a reasonable request, delivered courteously. It was the kind of small assistance flight attendants provide hundreds of times a day. But to Brittany, it was an imposition. It was another demand from another faceless passenger who didn't understand the pressures she was under. Brittany's eyes dropped from the call light to Alistair's face, then to the bag. A flicker of something ugly and dismissive crossed her features. It was a look Alistair had seen before in boardrooms and on construction sites, the instant unthinking dismissal of a black woman as someone unimportant, someone whose request was an annoyance, to be swatted away. "Passengers are responsible for their own luggage," Brittany stated, not as a helpful reminder of policy, but as a rebuke. "You should have stowed it when you boarded. We need to prepare for departure." Alistair remained calm, though a cold anger was beginning to coil in her gut. "I understand that," she replied, her voice steady. "But my roommates just arrived, and as I said, I'm trying not to inconvenience them or block the aisle." The student in 28C, sensing the tension, pulled off his headphones. The man in 28A looked on, his brow furrowed with concern. The interaction was now a small piece of theatre for the surrounding rows. This was Brittany's moment to de-escalate, to offer a cursory assist, and move on. She chose the opposite path. "It's a small bag," Brittany scoffed, her voice rising in pitch. "You can lift it yourself. We are not a full-service moving company. Now please turn off the light." She reached up and pressed the call button with a sharp, aggressive jab. But Alistair wasn't done. This was no longer about the bag. This was about the principle. This was about the Aura Wing brand being dragged through the mud by an employee's arrogance. "I'm not asking you to be a mover," Alistair said, her voice acquiring a new firmness that made Brittany pause. "I'm asking for the customer service that this airline promises its passengers. A little help is not an unreasonable request." That was the spark that lit the fuse. The word "promises" seemed to personally offend Brittany. To her, it sounded like an accusation, a challenge to her authority in her domain. Her carefully constructed composure cracked, revealing the raw resentment beneath. "Oh, I'm the problem now." Brittany sneered, her voice now loud enough to turn heads several rows away. "You people are all the same. You come on here with your demands and your attitude thinking we're your personal servants." The phrase, "you people," landed like a physical blow. It was vague, but pointed a poisoned dart of racial insinuation that was impossible to prove and impossible to ignore. The man in 28A shifted uncomfortably. "Hey now," he started to say, "that's uncalled for." But Brittany was focused entirely on Alistair. "I have a plane to secure for takeoff. Stow your bag now." Alistair knew she had to stand both literally and figuratively. Holding her book, she began to maneuver herself out of the seat, preparing to move the bag herself and end the mortifying scene. "Fine," she said, her voice low and tight with controlled fury. "I'll handle my own." As Alistair moved into the narrow space in front of her seat, turning to step into the aisle, Brittany took a step forward to block her path. "The captain has ordered the cabin secured. Sit down." "I am trying to stow my bag as you demanded," Alistair said, through gritted teeth. What happened next was a blur of shocking speed and disrespect. Instead of stepping back, instead of allowing Alistair the space to comply with her own contradictory orders, Brittany placed her hand flat on Alistair's shoulder and shoved. It wasn't a gentle nudge. It was a forceful, aggressive push designed to send a message. Unprepared for the physical contact, Alistair stumbled backward, her hip bumping hard against the armrest of her seat. Her copy of Meditations flew from her grasp, skittering under the seat in front of her. A collective audible gasp went through the cabin. The student in 28C flinched back. The man in 28A shot to his feet. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he yelled at Brittany. "You can't put your hands on a passenger." The scene had exploded. The low hum of the plane was now replaced by a stunned silence, followed by a wave of angry murmurs. Brittany seemed to realize she had crossed a line, but her instinct was not to apologize, but to double down, to paint herself as the victim of an unruly passenger. This passenger was refusing to take her seat. She was being disruptive and delaying our departure. She shouted, her voice trembling with a mixture of adrenaline and fear. Just then the senior purser, a woman named Lorraine, bustled down the aisle, her face a mask of stern concern. Lorraine was a relic of the Stratos Air era. A cynical veteran who believed passengers were the enemy, and that a flight attendant's primary job was to maintain order, not provide service. She was Brittany's mentor and ally. "What is going on here?" Lorraine demanded, her eyes immediately finding Brittany her friend, and not the passenger who had just been assaulted. "Lorraine, thank God," Brittany said, her voice suddenly taking on a pleading, theatrical tone. This woman was refusing to follow instructions. She wouldn't stow her bag, and she became aggressive when I told her to sit down. I was afraid she was going to— "She's lying," the man in 28A boomed. I saw the whole thing. The flight attendant shoved her for no reason. This lady just asked for a little help. Lorraine's gaze finally settled on Alistair, who was now slowly straightening up her body, thrumming with a silent, glacial rage. Lorraine's eyes swept over Alistair's simple clothes, her unassuming appearance. She made a swift, damning calculation. This was not a first-class passenger with a platinum card. This was a nobody. "Ma'am," Lorraine said, her voice dripping with condescension, "I'm going to have to ask you to calm down. If you continue to disrupt this flight, we will have you removed. The authorities will be waiting at the gate. Do you understand me?" There it was, the threat. The ultimate power play. Alistair looked from Brittany's panicked, self-serving face to Lorraine's smug, dismissive one. She saw the entire broken system in that one glance. The aggression, the lie to cover it up, and the manager who instinctively protected her own instead of the customer. Alistair made a decision. She would not reveal herself, not here. An outburst would make her just another angry black woman in their eyes. It would validate their narrative. Her revenge, her justice would be colder, more precise, and far more devastating. She took a deep breath, schooling her features into a mask of weary resignation. "There will be no more disruption," she said, her voice chillingly quiet. "I understand you perfectly." She bent down, retrieved her book, and sat down in 28B. The student, with a look of profound sympathy, wordlessly stood up, took her bag and lifted it into the overhead bin across the aisle, slamming it shut with a definitive thud. He sat back down and gave Brittany a look of pure disgust. Lorraine gave a final triumphant glare at Alistair, then nodded to Brittany. "Come on, let's get ready." As they walked away, Alistair could hear Brittany whispering to Lorraine, "Can you believe the nerve? Some people are just looking for a handout." Alistair opened her book, her hands trembling slightly. She stared at the page, but she didn't see the words. She saw the future of Aura Wing Airlines. And she saw the future of Brittany Gable and Lorraine. The flight had just begun, but for them, the final descent had already been initiated. They just didn't know it yet. The cabin doors closed with a heavy final thud. The safety demonstration video began to play on the seatback screens, the cheerful avatars and soothing music, a surreal counterpoint to the ugliness that had just transpired. For the next 5 hours, Alistair Vance was no longer a victim or a combatant. She became a ghost, a silent observer, meticulously documenting the decay within her own company. The rage that had flared within her did not cool. It condensed. It transformed from a hot, pulsing anger into a cold, hard diamond of resolve. Every dismissive glance, every curt response she witnessed from that moment forward was another piece of evidence, another nail in the coffin that Brittany Gable and Lorraine were building for themselves. From her seat, Alistair had a clear view of the rear galley, the flight attendant's sanctuary. She watched as Brittany and Lorraine, huddled together, their body language telling a story of shared grievance. They were not chastened. They were emboldened. They laughed, they rolled their eyes, and they occasionally cast disdainful looks down the aisle, no doubt recounting their version of the disruptive passenger in 28B. They felt they had won. They had put a difficult passenger in her place and faced no consequences. The system had worked exactly as they expected it to. The younger flight attendant, Alex, who had watched the initial confrontation with wide, worried eyes, seemed to be ostracized from their clique. He worked his side of the aisle diligently, his movements nervous, but his tone with passengers unfailingly polite. Alistair noted his kindness to the young mother, with the crying baby offering her a bottle of water and a warm, reassuring smile. He was the flicker of hope, the embodiment of the aura-wing spirit she wanted to cultivate. He was also a crucial witness. The beverage service began an hour into the flight. When Brittany reached their row, she addressed the student and the man on the aisle, her voice a saccharine, sweet parody of customer service. When she got to Alistair, she simply ignored her. She did not ask if she wanted a drink. She did not make eye contact. She moved her cart past as if seat 28B were empty. It was a petty, childish act of aggression, and it was powerfully effective. The man in 28A noticed immediately. "Excuse me," he called out. "You skipped this lady." Brittany turned her face a mask of feigned surprise. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see her." The lie was transparent, an insult layered on top of the initial injury. "What do you want?" she asked Alistair. Her tone making it clear she hoped the answer was nothing. "Just a black coffee, please," Alistair said, her voice even. Brittany slopped the coffee into a cup, spilling some into the saucer. She thrust it towards Alistair, without a word, her knuckles white around the cart handle. Alistair took it, her fingers brushing Brittany's. Brittany recoiled, as if she'd been burned. Throughout the flight, the pattern continued. Alistair watched Brittany ignore call lights for extended periods. She saw her speak rudely to a non-native English speaker who was confused about the customs form. She witnessed her and Lorraine spending more time gossiping in the galley than attending to the needs of the cabin. They weren't just bad at their jobs, they were actively hostile to the people they were paid to serve. Alistair, meanwhile, was meticulously planning her next moves. She took out a small, discreet notebook from her purse, not a corporate one, but a simple moleskin, and began to write. She wasn't writing about her feelings. She was writing an operational plan. Item 1. Full incident report. Passenger witnesses in 28A, Mr. Henderson. She'd discreetly seen his name on his boarding pass and 28C. Note, FA. Alex's positive counter-behavior. Item 2. Immediate indefinite suspension of FAs. Gable and Purser Lorraine pending full investigation. To be delivered personally. Item 3. Convene emergency meeting with Liam O'Connell, head of operations, and the entire HR executive team. This is not an HR issue. It's a cultural crisis. Item 4. The investigation must be top-down. Review all complaints filed against both employees over their entire careers with Stratus Air, Aura Wing. I suspect a pattern. Item 5. Body cameras. The pushback from the union was about privacy. The new argument is about protecting both crew and passengers from false accusations. This incident is Exhibit A. Item 6. A total overhaul of the In-Flight Service Excellence Program. Rebrand it as the Passenger Dignity Program. New trainers, new metrics, zero tolerance. She was building a case not just against 2 employees, but against the corporate apathy that allowed them to flourish. The $100 million investment in new planes was meaningless if the people operating them were actively sabotaging the brand. The shove she endured wasn't just a personal assault. It was an assault on her vision, her company, and every dollar she had invested in its future. Midway through the flight, the man in 28A, Mr. Henderson, leaned over. "I just want you to know," he whispered, "what they did was outrageous. I fly this route twice a month for work. That one," he nodded towards Brittany, "is always miserable. You should file a formal complaint. I'll back you up. I'll write a statement. My name is Robert Henderson. I work for a major tech firm. They'll listen to me." Alistair gave him a small, grateful smile. It was the first time she had shown any genuine emotion since the incident. "Thank you, Robert. That means more than you know. I intend to take this very seriously." He saw the steel in her eyes, the quiet determination, and he seemed to realize this was more than just an upset passenger. He nodded, satisfied. "Good." As the plane began its initial descent into San Francisco, the familiar routine of cabin preparation began. Brittany walked the aisle, her eyes scanning for seatbelts and tray tables. Her gaze swept over Alistair with practiced indifference. In her mind, the incident was over. She had asserted her dominance and faced no repercussions. In a few minutes, this woman, this Lena Hughes, would disappear into the anonymity of the airport, and she would never have to think of her again. Alistair watched her pass. She thought of the ancient Greek concept of hubris, the dangerous overconfidence and pride that often precedes a fall. Brittany and Lorraine were so cocooned in their petty authority, so confident in their place within the airline's hierarchy that they couldn't conceive of a world where their actions would have real life-altering consequences. They couldn't imagine that the quiet woman in 28B had the power to not just fire them, but to dismantle the entire culture that bred them. The wheels touched down on the tarmac with a gentle bump. The engines spooled down. As the plane taxied to the gate, Alistair put away her notebook. The observation phase was over. The action phase was about to begin. She remained seated patiently waiting as the other passengers disembarked, including her helpful row mates. Mr. Henderson gave her a final encouraging nod as he left. When the cabin was nearly empty, Alistair finally stood up. She walked calmly towards the front, where Brittany and Lorraine stood by the exit, bidding farewell to the last few passengers with plastic smiles. They saw her coming. Lorraine's expression hardened, expecting a final parting shot of complaint. Brittany's face was a mask of contempt. Alistair stopped in front of them. She looked directly at Lorraine, the purser, the manager, the one who had enabled and escalated the entire situation. "I need your names," Alistair said, her voice soft, but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Your full names and employee numbers." Lorraine laughed, a short, sharp bark of disbelief. "I don't think so. We're not required to give you that information. If you have a complaint, you can write to corporate. They have a special file for letters like yours." She meant the trash can. Alistair held her gaze unflinching. "I'm not asking for the complaint process. I am telling you to give me your names and employee numbers. It is now a direct instruction." The strangeness of her tone, the sheer audacity of her command, seemed to momentarily confuse them. "You're not in a position to give us instructions," Brittany sneered. "Now please get off of the plane." Alistair gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Very well." She didn't argue. She didn't threaten. She simply turned and walked down the jet bridge, melting into the flow of the terminal. Brittany and Lorraine exchanged a look of triumphant derision. "What a psycho," Brittany muttered, shaking her head. Good riddance. Don't worry about it, Lorraine said, patting her on the arm. She's a nobody. By tomorrow she won't even remember our faces. We'll never hear about this again. It was perhaps the most profoundly wrong prediction of her entire life. 2 days passed. For Brittany Gable, the incident on Flight 723 had already faded into the background noise of her life filed away as just another stressful day at work. She had recounted a heavily edited version of the story to her fiancé, painting herself as a heroic figure who had bravely stood up to an unruly and aggressive passenger. She and Lorraine had laughed about it over post-flight drinks, mocking the woman's final empty demand for their names. They were untouchable, protected by their union and the unwritten code of solidarity among the old Stratus Air crew. The complaint, if one was ever filed, would land on the desk of someone they knew someone who would file it away under unsubstantiated. On the 3rd day, a Wednesday, Brittany was at home planning her wedding when her phone buzzed. It was an email from corporate. The subject line was stark: mandatory meeting regarding in-flight incident. Her heart gave a little jolt of annoyance, not fear. So the crazy woman did complain, she thought. Unbelievable. She opened the email. It was a formal summons. She and Purser Lorraine were to report to the Aura Wing corporate headquarters in San Francisco the following morning at 9:00 a.m. sharp. They were to meet with the Vice President of In-Flight Operations, Liam O'Connell. She immediately called Lorraine. "Did you get it?" Brittany asked, her voice laced with indignation. "The email." "We have to go to HQ tomorrow." Lorraine's voice was a world-weary sigh. "I got it. Don't panic. This is just procedure. O'Connell has to be seen to be doing something." Liam O'Connell was a new face part of the management team that had come in with the Aura Wing acquisition. He was known as a numbers guy, a corporate suit who didn't understand the realities of the job. "What should we say?" Brittany asked, a sliver of anxiety finally piercing her confidence. "We stick to the story," Lorraine said firmly. "It's our word against hers, and we're the uniformed crew." The passenger was non-compliant. She refused to stow her bag. She became agitated and aggressive. She created a disturbance. You felt the situation was escalating, and you acted to maintain order and secure the cabin for an on-time departure. You placed a hand on her shoulder to guide her back to her seat. That's it. Simple. Clean. "She shoved me," Brittany whined, testing the waters of a more dramatic lie. "Don't overdo it," Lorraine snapped. "A push is subjective. Guiding her firmly back to her seat sounds professional. She shoved me sounds like a playground fight. We are the professionals here, and whatever you do, let me do the talking at first. O'Connell might be new, but he's still management. He doesn't want problems, he wants solutions. And the easiest solution for him is to make this go away." Reassured, Brittany's confidence returned. Of course, Lorraine was right. They would go in, look professional, calmly state their case, and O'Connell would tick a box, file a report, and that would be the end of it. The passenger, this Lena Hughes, was probably looking for a flight voucher or a few thousand frequent flyer miles. They'd give it to her and tell her to go away. The next morning, Brittany and Lorraine met in the lobby of the gleaming Aura Wing Tower. The building itself was a statement. The old Stratus Air headquarters had been a drab, uninspired building from the 1980s. This new space was all glass and steel and light, with a massive, soaring atrium and a digital waterfall cascading down one wall. It felt alien and intimidating. "A bit much, isn't it?" Brittany whispered, tugging at the hem of her uniform jacket. "All flash, no substance?" Lorraine muttered. "Don't let the fancy furniture scare you. It's the same game, just a different board. They checked in at the marble reception desk and were given visitor passes. They rode the silent, high-speed elevator to the 40th floor, the executive wing. The doors opened onto a hushed, plushly carpeted corridor. The air smelled of money and power. A severe-looking executive assistant with a headset met them. "Ms. Gable, Ms. Dalton," she asked, using Lorraine's last name. "Mr. O'Connell will see you now. Please follow me." She led them not to a small, stuffy office, but to a vast boardroom. One entire wall was a panoramic window with a breathtaking view of the San Francisco Bay. In the center of the room was a long, dark wood table that could easily seat 30 people. Seated at the head of the table was Liam O'Connell, a man in his 50s, with silvering hair and a stern, unreadable expression. Standing by the window, looking out at the bay with her back to them, was a woman dressed in a sharp, impeccably tailored, dark grey power suit. "Lorraine Brittany, thank you for coming," O'Connell said, his voice grave. He did not invite them to sit. "We have a very serious matter to discuss." Lorraine stepped forward, ready to launch into her carefully rehearsed speech. "Liam, I'm glad we have this opportunity to clarify what happened. There's been a significant misunderstanding." "There has been no misunderstanding." O'Connell cut her off, his voice like ice. The bluntness of the interruption shocked them into silence. He gestured towards the figure at the window. "Before we proceed, there's someone you need to meet. She is the new principal owner and CEO of Aura Wing Airlines." Brittany and Lorraine exchanged a confused glance. The new owner. The media had only ever reported that Vance Conglomerate had bought the airline. The CEO was supposed to be some reclusive engineer. They had never seen a picture of her. The woman at the window turned around slowly. She had the same elegant, intelligent face, the same calm, assessing eyes. Her hair was down now, styled professionally. She was wearing a different outfit, one that probably cost more than Brittany's car. But there was no mistaking who it was. It was the woman from seat 28B, the woman they had called Lena Hughes. Brittany Gable's world tilted on its axis. The air rushed from her lungs, replaced by a surge of ice-cold dread. Her carefully constructed reality, her confidence, her entire sense of security, shattered into a million pieces. The blood drained from her face. She felt her knees go weak. Lorraine stared, her mouth agape, her face a comical mask of disbelief and horror. The nobody, the psycho, the woman they had dismissed and humiliated, was standing before them as the ultimate authority, the phantom billionaire who signed all of their paychecks. Alistair Vance took a step forward. Her expression was not one of anger or triumph. It was one of profound, chilling disappointment. "Ms. Gable, Ms. Dalton," she said, her voice the same one she had used on the plane, but now it carried the crushing weight of absolute power. "I believe we have some things to discuss. Please take a seat. We have your full, unedited in-flight service records, every complaint ever filed against you, and video from the jet bridge cameras. But first, I'd like you to tell Mr. O'Connell in your own words what happened on Flight 723. She paused, her eyes locking onto Brittany's. "Start with the part where you tell me I'm not in a position to give you instructions. I find that part particularly instructive." The silence in the boardroom was absolute. The only sound was the frantic, panicked hammering of Brittany Gable's own heart. The hard karma she never saw coming had just arrived, and it owned the entire building. The boardroom on the 40th floor felt like a vacuum-sealed chamber where all the oxygen had been sucked out. Brittany's mind was a frantic kaleidoscope of scrambled thoughts and pure, unadulterated terror. The face of the woman from 28B, now identified as the owner of the entire airline, was superimposed over a flashing reel of her own actions, the sneer, the condescending tone, the words, "you people," and the final catastrophic shove. Lorraine, for the first time in her long, cynical career, was speechless. Her face, usually a mask of smug authority, had collapsed into slack-jawed horror. The script she had so carefully prepared was now a pile of ashes at her feet. They weren't there to manage a complaint. They were specimens under a microscope. Alistair Vance walked slowly from the window and took a seat opposite them, next to Liam O'Connell. She moved with a quiet grace that seemed to amplify the tension in the room. She folded her hands on the polished surface of the table and waited. "Well?" she prompted, her voice calm and dangerously soft. "I'm waiting. Tell us your version. I'm genuinely curious to see how it aligns with reality." Liam O'Connell, his face grim, slid 2 thick file folders across the table. One was labeled Gable B, and the other Dalton L. Lorraine finally found her voice, a strained, croaking thing that bore no resemblance to her usual sharp tone. "Dr. Vance, there has been a terrible, terrible misunderstanding. We had no idea who you were." Alistair's eyes narrowed slightly. "That is the entire point," she said, her voice cutting through Lorraine's babbling. "My identity is irrelevant. Whether I am the CEO or a student flying home for the first time, the standard of professional dignity should be the same. The fact that you believe you would have treated me differently had you known who I was is in itself the core of the problem. It proves that you operate on a system of perceived status, not one of uniform service. You are confessing to the very disease I am here to eradicate." She turned her gaze to Brittany, who looked as if she were about to faint. "Ms. Gable, you were asked a question." Brittany swallowed hard, her throat dry. We were trying to secure the cabin for departure," she stammered, falling back on the ghost of the prepared lie. "The passenger, you, were standing and I just guided you back to your seat." "Guided me," Alistair repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. "An interesting euphemism. Mr. O'Connell, please play the first file." Liam tapped a key on his laptop, and a large screen on the wall flickered to life. It was CCTV footage from the jet bridge, time-stamped to the moment of deplaning. The audio was crystal clear. The video showed Alistair calmly asking for their names and employee numbers. Then came Lorraine's voice, dripping with scorn. "I don't think so. We're not required to give you that information. If you have a complaint, you can write to corporate. They have a special file for letters like yours." Then Brittany's voice. "Psycho. Good riddance." Brittany flinched as if she had been slapped. Lorraine sank lower in her chair, her face turning a blotchy red. "Let's move past the guidance," Alistair said coolly. "Let's talk about the shove, a physical assault on a passenger. Let's talk about the use of the phrase, 'you people.' Let's talk about deliberately skipping me during the beverage service. Let's talk about the subsequent lies you told each other, and that you were prepared to tell Mr. O'Connell today to cover your tracks. Which part of that professional failure would you like to address first?" "It was a stressful flight." Brittany burst out, tears of panic now streaming down her face. "Boarding was chaotic. I'm overworked, underpaid. The shifts are brutal. You are describing the job," Alistair interrupted, her voice devoid of sympathy. "A job I pay you for. A job that thousands of qualified professional people would be grateful to have. Do you think you are the only one who is stressed? Do you think the young mother with the crying baby wasn't stressed? Do you think the elderly man you snapped at wasn't stressed? Your job is to alleviate the stress of travel, not to multiply it with your own personal grievances. She opened the file folder with Brittany's name on it. I have here your entire history. In the last 3 years under Stratos Air, you had 12 formal passenger complaints filed against you. For rudeness, for dismissiveness, for aggressive behavior. All of them were dismissed by your previous supervisor, who I see was a close personal friend. Under my ownership in the last 6 months, you have had 4 more. This incident on Flight 723 was not an anomaly, Ms. Gable. It was the culmination of a long and documented pattern of professional misconduct. She then slid the other folder towards Lorraine. And you, Ms. Dalton. As the purser, you are the senior leadership in that cabin. Your job is to set the standard. When a conflict arises, your duty is to de-escalate, investigate, and protect the customer. Instead, you did the opposite. You saw a confrontation, you immediately took your friend's side. Without a single question, you ignored the testimony of another passenger, and you threatened the victim of an assault with removal from the flight. You are not just an enabler, you are a co-conspirator. You are the rot in management. Lorraine finally broke. The cynical mask shattered, replaced by desperate pleading. Please, Dr. Vance, I have been with this airline for 25 years. It's my whole life. I made a mistake, a terrible error in judgment. Please don't take my career away from me. I can change. We can change. Alistair listened, her expression unmoving. Change was already offered to you, she said. It was offered 6 months ago when we became Aura Wing. We invested millions in new training programs I note from your records. Ms. Dalton, you completed with perfunctory attendance. We sent out memos about the new passenger-centric philosophy. We gave everyone a chance to embrace a new culture. You and Miss Gable, it seems, chose to treat it as a joke. You chose to believe the old ways of doing things, the toxic culture of us versus them, would protect you. You were wrong. She stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Mr. O'Connell has your termination papers. You are both dismissed from Aura Wing Airlines effective immediately. Your final paychecks will be mailed to you. An email is being sent to your union representatives outlining the cause for termination, supported by video evidence and passenger witness statements, including one from Mr. Robert Henderson of a major tech firm who was so appalled by your behavior that he volunteered to testify against you. We do not anticipate a successful appeal. Brittany let out a sob, a raw, guttural sound of pure despair. No, please, I'm getting married. Please, I have a mortgage. You can't do this. Alistair looked down at her, not with pity, but with a final damning assessment. You should have thought of your mortgage when you decided to physically assault a customer. You should have thought of your wedding when you chose to lie to your superior. Your life choices are your own. Your professional consequences are now mine to deliver. She paused at the door. Your access badges have been deactivated. Security will escort you from the building. I suggest you go quietly. With that, she turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving the 2 women in the ruins of their careers. Liam O'Connell slid the termination papers across the table. 2 security guards, large and impassive, entered the room and stood by the door. The reckoning was swift, total, and absolute. But for Brittany, Gable, the hard karma was only just beginning. The corporate execution was over. The public humiliation was yet to come. Losing her job was a brutal blow, but Brittany Gable had no concept of how much further she had to fall. The initial shock gave way to a furious, self-righteous anger. In her mind, she was the victim. She had been entrapped by a billionaire playing dress-up a corporate tyrant who had used a minor incident to make an example of her. She refused to accept the core truth that her own actions were the sole cause of her downfall. Her fiancé, a man named Kevin, echoed her sense of grievance. "This is insane," he fumed. "She set you up. We should sue for wrongful termination. We should go to the media." That was the spark Brittany needed. The media. If Aura Wing wanted to play hardball, so would she. She would get ahead of the story. She would paint herself as the hard-working flight attendant, a victim of corporate cruelty and a woke agenda. Working with Kevin, she crafted a long, emotional post on Facebook, which she made public. She didn't mention the shove or the racial undertones of her comments. Instead, she wrote, "I am utterly devastated. After 10 years of dedicated service as a flight attendant, I was fired today by the new billionaire CEO of Aura Wing Airlines. My crime, asking a passenger to follow standard safety regulations before takeoff. This passenger, who I later learned was the CEO flying undercover, became belligerent and disruptive. In a moment of chaos, I put my hand on her arm to prevent a safety issue, and for this my life has been ruined. This is the new corporate America, where loyal employees are thrown away to satisfy the ego of an out-of-touch owner. Please share my story. Corporate bullying Aura Wing. Airlines justice for Brittany." The post went viral. Initially, it worked exactly as she'd hoped. A wave of public sympathy poured in. People who distrusted large corporations and billionaires rallied to her cause. "This is disgusting. Firing a working-class woman for doing her job," one comment read. A GoFundMe was started. A local news station called for an interview. For 48 hours, Brittany Gable was a cause célèbre, a martyr sacrificed on the altar of corporate power. She felt vindicated, powerful even. Meanwhile, inside Aura Wing, Alistair Vance was not idle. The terminations of Brittany and Lorraine were just the first step. Her meeting was not with the press, but with her entire executive team. The situation with former employees Gable and Dalton is a symptom of a deeper disease, she stated, her voice resonating with authority. It is a legacy culture from Stratus Air that prioritized crew comfort over passenger dignity. That ends today. Liam, I want the passenger dignity program fast-tracked. I want F.A. Alex, the flight attendant who acted with professionalism on that flight, brought in. I want him to be part of the new training team. Find the good ones and empower them." She turned to her chief legal officer. "The union will fight. Be prepared. But more importantly, prepare for the public narrative." Ms. Gable has taken her version of the story to social media. "We're already monitoring it, Dr. Vance," the legal officer said. "Her narrative is gaining traction." "Good," Alistair said, which surprised everyone in the room. Let her build her platform of lies. It will only make the truth more devastating when it comes out." Alistair had a final, crucial piece of evidence she had held in reserve. During the initial confrontation, the student in seat 28C, shaken by the shove, had instinctively pulled out his phone and recorded the aftermath: Lorraine's arrival, her threats to Alistair and the passenger, Mr. Henderson, defending her. The student had contacted Aura Wing's customer service the next day, not to complain, but to offer the video as evidence. 2 days after Brittany's viral post, just as her GoFundMe was nearing $10,000, and she was preparing for her TV interview, Aura Wing Airlines released an official statement. It was not a long corporate speak memo. It was a simple factual post on all their social media channels, authored directly by Alistair Vance. It read, "At Aura Wing, our commitment is to the safety and dignity of every passenger. Recently, there has been a great deal of public discussion regarding the termination of 2 of our former flight attendants. We have been accused of corporate bullying. We believe in transparency, Below is a link to a video taken by a passenger on Flight 723, along with a full statement from another passenger, Mr. Robert Henderson. We did not release this earlier out of respect for the privacy of those involved, but the public narrative spun by one of the former employees has made this necessary. We did not fire an employee for asking a passenger to follow rules. We fired an employee for physically shoving a passenger and another for attempting to cover it up. Judge for yourself. The link led to the student's video. It clearly showed Lorraine threatening Alistair, who remained perfectly calm. It included audio of Mr. Henderson saying, "I saw the whole thing. The flight attendant shoved her for no reason." The post also included a PDF of Henderson's signed detailed statement of the entire event, from Brittany's initial rudeness to the final shove. The internet's verdict was instantaneous and brutal. The tide of public opinion didn't just turn. It became a tsunami of rage directed squarely at Brittany. The comments on her Facebook post shifted from sympathy to fury. "So you lied. You got shoved and then threatened. Unbelievable." She didn't put a hand on her arm. She assaulted her and then played the victim. And the "you people" comment that Mr. Henderson mentions in his statement. Yeah, we know what that meant. You're not just a liar. You're a racist. The GoFundMe page was shut down, with the platform issuing refunds due to fraudulent claims. The local news station cancelled her interview, instead running a segment about her deceptive social media campaign. Her name, once a symbol of victimhood, became shorthand for a liar who cried wolf. Her fiancé, seeing the sheer toxicity of the situation and the viciousness of the public backlash, began to distance himself. The wedding plans were quietly, indefinitely put on hold. The hard karma had hit. It wasn't just the loss of a job. It was the complete and utter destruction of her reputation, built on a pyre of her own lies. She was unemployable in the industry she knew, and her name was now infamous online. She had flown too close to the sun, not realizing the sun itself was sitting quietly in seat 28B. Lorraine, who had quietly slunk away, found herself unemployable as well. The tight-knit airline community had seen the video. No airline would touch a purser who enabled assault and lied to cover it up. Her 25-year career had evaporated into nothing. Weeks later, Aura Wing Airlines announced the launch of its new Passenger Dignity Charter. The promotional video featured several flight attendants, including a confident, smiling Alex, who spoke about the new focus on respect and service. The company's approval ratings began to climb. Passenger satisfaction scores soared. Alistair Vance, the ghost in the machine, had performed the necessary surgery. By cutting out the cancer, she had allowed the healthy tissue to thrive. The airline was being reborn, not just with new planes, but with a new soul forged in the fire of an ugly incident and built on the simple, powerful principle that everyone, from the CEO to the passenger in the last row, deserves to be treated with dignity. What you've just heard is more than a story about a rude flight attendant. It's a powerful lesson in hidden authority and the inescapable nature of karma. It shows us that the person we choose to disrespect, the individual we deem unimportant, might just hold the keys to the very world we operate in. Brittany Gable's mistake wasn't just a shove. It was a profound failure to see the humanity and potential power in every single person she met. She wasn't fired by a billionaire. She was fired by her own arrogance. The consequences were not just the loss of a job, but the public demolition of a reputation built on a foundation of lies. This is the kind of real-life drama that reminds us that our actions, big and small, always have consequences. If this story resonated with you, please give this video a like to help us reach more people. Share it with someone who needs to hear a story of epic karma. And most importantly, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We bring you the most intense and satisfying stories of justice and comeuppance every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for listening.